right. Well, I spent most of worship arguing with the Lord. His idea of his plan for what he wants to say and my idea of what would be good to say are not always the same thing. And so he had spent some time this afternoon because I told Steve earlier today, I felt really confident in what the Lord had given me for Sunday morning. I felt pretty confident in what the Lord had given me for tomorrow, but I had not been able to put my hands on what was he saying tonight. And so for tonight, and so I just spent some time with the Lord this afternoon, and he took me to some scriptures, and he took me to a message I had preached somewhere, sometime, I don't know when it was, at some point. And as I was sitting in the hotel room, I was like, okay, that's good, God, I can work with that. And I walked in the door, and I thought, this is both a compliment to you and I'm just processing here out loud so you hear how this works, because I think that's an important part of what I want to share with you. Sometimes you think somebody stands up in the pulpit, whether it be Steve or I or any guest speaker or whatever, and they just got it all down pat because they bring a word and the Lord moves. And that's usually not how it works. Usually we walk through a really challenging process of figuring out what the Lord is saying. And so I've got this, I think, okay, I've got it figured out. This is what the Lord has said. I'm good. I can do this. And I walked in the door, and this compliment for you is, I thought to myself as I walked in the door, and I'm standing here as worship starts, and for some reason I've been blinded to this concept because I think to myself, my God, what are you telling me to speak to these people? Because you're telling me to talk about something they've been trying to work through and have been working through for years. This is because the Lord really took me to this thing about what intercession is and what it means to practice his presence. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this makes absolutely no sense, because this is where you guys just stood forever, in this place of just be in his presence and just intercede and pray and see what he's doing. And so I'm really like arguing with the Lord during worship that he's wrong, because you couldn't be saying that. They know this. And the Lord took me to Jeremiah 6:16, where he says, and they stood at the crossroads, and he says, and ask for the ancient paths and walk therein. And, I talk about that passage a fair amount because it's a significant passage for me. Because Israel's answer in Jeremiah 6:16, when God says, you're standing at the crossroads, ask for the ancient paths, Israel's answer to him is, no, I'm not going to. They were comfortable with where they were. They were dealing with what seemed to be working to them. They were happy with the way things were. But the truth was they were in a mess. And when they say no, it strikes me every time I read that, because our answer is supposed to be yes. We're standing at a crossroads. And so I want to address something from the realm of intercession and intimacy with God and his presence, because everything then, as I'm arguing with God, keeps coming back to this hit me with just do what I tell you to kind of a concept. Because first of all, the songs we're singing, I see, and when I say I see, I like to be real open with what I see. When I saw an angel come in and go to the drums during worship. And so when I tell you that, what I mean by that is I learned something from a guy named Bobby Conner. I know y'all probably have heard of him. And I asked him one time, because he sees all these angels and sees angelic things, and I asked him one time, I said, could you just explain to me how you started seeing angels? Because I want to see angels. I really would rather just see Jesus, but angels will do, so that works. But I want to see angels. And how did you, do you learn it? Do you, give me the scoop on this? And so he looks at me and he says, well, Michael, I just first started seeing these little lights. And when I started paying attention to the little lights I was seeing, then I began to hear the Lord tell me what they were. And after I paid attention to them for a while and began to hear him tell me what they were for a while, then I started actually seeing the thing he used to have to tell me that it was. So I'm in that stage of I see little lights and have to ask the Lord what it is. So I actually saw this red light over the drum set and had to ask the Lord what it was, because I'm thinking, is that a word for somebody? Is this going to be a prophetic ministry? And I do think there's some things to share, but individual things to share. But
Yeah.
I'm asking the Lord, what is it? And he just said, it's an angel, because that's entered this place and plays the drums in this place. And I'm thinking, okay, so, because sometimes people think, I don't engage in worship, because sometimes I'll sit down and I'm really engaging in worship, because I'm like in this spot of, what are you talking about, Lord? And so I had to look up, what's the purpose of drums, right? I think I know, but I wasn't sure. I'm not a music person, right? You music people can correct me if I'm wrong, right? But if I understand it right, the purpose of drums is to lay the foundation. It puts the foundation beneath everything and gives you the rhythm for where you're going.
You need to be careful.
And what I really loved and what the Lord just put in my heart was, the purpose of drums was to lay the foundation. And you guys ushered in the angelic here to lay foundation. And so the Lord has assigned angelic support here to keep the rhythm. So a foundation was laid during actually years of process that ushered in this angelic being to keep you on rhythm. But now we have a problem, because what happens is, and I'm not going to preach necessarily, we're just family, so I'm going to talk. I got notes, but I think it's easier just to talk. And so if I just sort of generally quote scriptures and things, you can ask me later, because I've got them all written down and stuff. But I just feel like this is the better way to approach things, because we are intimate. It's a smaller group. I don't see anybody I don't know that I haven't at least seen before. I think everybody's family. So you've got this foundation that's been laid with the labors. I don't know, what was that, 7 years? That was a long time. You guys were just...
Hey. Oh.
Yeah, so you're talking about 6, 7 years type thing. And really that 3.5 years is what really solidified things, because it wasn't mandated from the outside, it was done from the inside. And so we look at this process that you walk through. We've laid this foundation, and you literally ushered in the angelic presence. And the Lord was very firm on this tonight. You ushered in that angelic presence for foundation and rhythm. And as we look at that, now COVID hits, which is exactly what I was hearing from the Lord on this. And we have this mindset of seeking the ancient paths. And we've laid a foundation to seek where we are, what is God doing, and we're right at this brink. And I think there's even been some prophetic words and things about what's about to come forth and COVID comes into play. And what I want to warn you on and guard you on tonight and just sort of lay out for you is this. It's really easy when you've been seeking the Lord and learning to intercede and just draw near to Him, when you have an outside influence that comes in and hits, to get focused instead of on practicing His presence, on praying about the stuff. And it's not just praying about stuff, it's sometimes just praying about my stuff. And sometimes it moves in, can I just be, maybe this applies to nobody. If it applies to somebody and I step on your toes, because I started to say, can I be direct, but I'm going to be anyway. So if it steps on your toes, don't get mad at me. You can come talk to me and we'll figure out. But I want to just say to you, we get so caught up right now, the church as a whole, and I have a suspicion you're dealing with something that most of the church is dealing with. We get so caught up in our opinion of what's happening with COVID, in our opinion with what's happening with politics, and our opinion with what's happening with protests, and our opinion with what's happening with this and this and this, because that's what the enemy's doing right now to the church, that we stop practicing his presence and we start pursuing prayer about the stuff we think God ought to be doing. And we start pursuing prayer about the things we think the enemy ought to stop doing. Now, I got to take you to a scripture. I'm going to have to look at this one because I'm going to have to take you to a place, because I was in Jeremiah 6:16 and he was talking about this idea of the Lord, telling us to pursue the ancient paths. And then he takes me to this passage. Now I've got to find it because I said I'm not going to read that passage. I'll have to find it for you. Hang on a second. It's like in Jeremiah 16 or 17 or something like that. I'm just going to tell you. I'll look it up and figure out where it was. I'm just going to tell you what it was. In the middle of verse, he takes this passage where, this is not my normal sermon, right? So we're just hear me. He takes this passage, he says, and it says, are not all the afflictions or the things that are coming against Judah, aren't they there to have them repent? Okay? All the stuff that's happening against Judah, maybe they'll recognize and notice that it's for repentance. And he says something really important. He says, those things that I sent against Judah are there to cause repentance. And I'm just going to tell you something. I don't think the enemy has been half as involved in COVID as we give him credit for being. I think it was the enemy's plan. Don't hear me wrong, okay? I think it was the enemy instituted it. I think the enemy started it. And I don't care whether you think it was man-made or it was natural or it was some plan or a conspiracy. It didn't matter. I think the enemy started it. Wherever it came from, the enemy started it. And God looked at it and said, oh, this will be a good opportunity to get the church back on track. And God took over. And here's what we found out. God has been revealing your hearts. For the last 2 years, God has been revealing the heart of the church. And sometimes it's been very frustrating because sometimes it's meant that people walk away because somebody else doesn't believe exactly like them about something that doesn't even matter. We get so concerned over who's going to wear a mask and who's going to take a vaccine, we forget to say to God, what are you doing? And we get busy praying about the stuff that's wrong instead of sticking to the foundation of his presence being in our midst. And I think the word the Lord has given me tonight, I know I'm sort of tumbling it out. I think the word the Lord has given me for you tonight is stick to the foundation. Don't let the enemy drag you into the division and the stress from all this stuff that's happening around us. Stick to that foundation. He's given you angelic support to stay in that foundation. He's given you 3.5 years of preparation for this season. There are churches who've gone from 300 or 400 people on a Sunday morning to 20 or 30 on a Sunday morning. Do you notice that you haven't changed dramatically? You haven't grown massively, but you haven't changed dramatically. That's growth. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? You are not in a place of losing ground. You are stable when much of the church fell apart. Now, that does not mean you don't have different opinions on stuff that's happening. Don't get caught on those. Get focused on what God's doing right now, the foundation he laid in you. Stay firm in that focus. When he was speaking to me about intercession and this concept, and I'm arguing with him about this issue of you understand this, the key component to that he was talking to me about was this issue and this fact that intercession is not about asking him to do stuff. In truth, some of you would say you're intercessors, and some of you would say you have a gift of intercession. In truth, I don't find that gift in the Scripture. I find the gift of prayer in the Scripture, but not the gift of intercession. Jesus is our chief intercessor. He mediates between God and man. If we're in the midst of a trial because we're being brought to trial for where we stand, for our standards, for our place, for our being exposed for who we really are, which is what's happening to the church right now. Why in the world would we want to stand up and make our own defense when we have the best trial lawyer in creation who's willing to do it? Jesus. So why are we trying to intervene in between the stuff and what's being exposed? Why not let Jesus deal with that part of it, and we just spend the time in his presence that keeps us pointed in the right direction? I'm not telling you don't pray about things, okay? Don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying I don't believe in intercession. I'm a big believer in intercession and intercessory prayer. What I'm saying is, let's be focused right now on what it is he's given us to do. And it's not to fix the world. It's to fix the church so that the world can be fixed. And you guys are in a stable place. You may not believe this, but you are. I look from the outside and you're in a stable place. It may feel bumpy and it may feel rocky, but when you look at the rest of the church world around you, you guys are pretty stable. And that's a good thing. Because intercession and what God is doing right now is not about praying for the stuff. It's about being transformed inside so we look more like him, so the stuff that needs to get done can happen. Because he's not interested, I'm just going to be bold and say it, he's not interested in fixing the politics and stopping the COVID and changing the protesting right now. He's interested in the church realizing how foolish we've been. He's interested in showing us where we're divided. He's interested in showing us why we want things our way instead of his way. He's interested in getting rid of our opinions and getting us back to his presence. Now, if you understand that, you're not going to hear me being critical of you. If you don't understand what I'm saying, you're going to think I'm stepping on your toes. Because what I'm telling you, if I can now be really blunt about it, is forget your opinions. I don't care if you want to do this or don't want to do that, or I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's what does God want right now that's important. And the church across the board is so focused on their opinion that they can't see what God is doing anymore. I told my wife, I liked Christians a lot better before I started reading people's opinions on Facebook. I have come to the place I like my non-Christian friends better than I like some of my Christian friends. Because everybody has an opinion about everything, and nobody any longer has even the good sense to see if their opinion is based on truth anymore or not. They just spout out whatever they think anymore. Now I'm just telling you the truth, because I don't care. You're not ever going to have me back after this, so I don't care. Now I'm going to pick on COVID for a minute, but it's not solely about that, okay? You understand what I'm saying? I don't care whether you are 1,000% pro-vaccination or 1,000% anti-vaccination. Everybody's spouting their opinion about it, instead of going to God to say, what do you think? This is what is being revealed in the church today. I'm not accusing you individually of it. If you're convicted on it, then that's God, not me, because I don't know. I haven't read any of your Facebook posts. Honestly, I have not. Okay? But you hear what I'm saying. we're seeing this tugging apart to extremes and ends, and nobody is just simply saying, God, what are you doing and what are you saying? You are so uniquely positioned here because of what you've walked through to be in that spot of practicing his presence that I can't think of any other churches I visit that are in that spot, Steve. I really can't. Now, I can't speak to how well you're doing it. I can only speak to the position God has you in. He prepped you to be a picture of his presence in this season. Now, you have to evaluate how well you're doing it. Because I'm not going to pick, if I knew it, I wouldn't pick on anybody individually on it. Why? Because I don't think anybody's opinion really matters right now, including my own. People ask me about, again, I'm picking on COVID, but don't hear it being a COVID discussion. That's just a big thing that's in the forefront right now. Next year, it'll be something else. COVID is going to go away, and it'll be something new. If you think that we get past COVID either naturally, supernaturally, or some other way, and everything's going to go back to normal, then get over it. We are not going back to normal. We're moving to a new normal because God is not going to let the church stay in the old normal because I could say it in a bad way. It was bad. I just want to say it sucked, is what I want to say. See, I work around people who are not Christians, right? And that's their view of things. The old normal was lousy. The old normal for the church was lousy. We don't want to go back there. And God is not going to let us back there. And the enemy sure isn't, because he's got the church on the run right now. He's got the church crumbling with half the people staying home and saying they're watching online. I know a pastor who says, one of my lead people in the church, I asked him why he didn't come back. He says, it's a whole lot easier to watch you in my pajamas, and when I get bored, I can go get something to eat. What? The normal is not normal. There was no, if that's the mindset, then there was no commitment to the presence of the Lord. There was just a commitment of I'm supposed to be at church. And if I can be at church without having to be there, that makes it a lot easier for me, so let's take the easy route. The stuff we're dealing with is not ending. I wouldn't be shocked at all, I'm not going to say it prophetically, but I feel like I could, that there's not another new variant of COVID or a whole new pandemic in 6 months from now. Why? Because the enemy has us on the run with these things. He's got us fighting with each other so badly that we're no longer worried about a world that doesn't know him. I find that, I'll just give you an example. Because I'm not preaching, I'm just sharing, and I'm on my soapbox, so I'm going to stay there for a little bit. I have a barber. You guys know I do a lot. I've been pretty open with you. I do a lot of work with pagan, LGBTQ plus communities, things like that. And so I have a very intentional relationship with my barber who considers himself a pagan. He grew up in a charismatic home with his father, a preacher. Left it because of what he saw the church do to his dad, really, is what it boils down to. Myself and another pastor have been getting our hair cut with him for 3 years now. And COVID has made it difficult to get in to see him and different things. And so he considers himself a pagan. He's very pro-vaccination, very pro-mask wearing, all these kind of things. And my friend, the other pastor, is very anti-vaccination and anti-mask wearing. I'm kind of neutral. If I need to wear a mask to share the gospel with you, I'm going to wear a mask. I have a vaccination because all my communities I work with in the pagan world and the LGBTQ plus world, if I wasn't vaccinated, they would never have anything to do with me again. And I worked too hard to build a relationship with them to bring them into the kingdom to say they don't matter anymore. That's what I'm talking about. What's God worried about, not what am I worried about? It doesn't make a hill of beans worth of difference whether I think the vaccine's good or bad. If I can't reach the community that God has given me to reach and he didn't tell me to abandon them, then there's no issue. I have to take a vaccine because I'm going to go reach them. That's the bottom line of it. That's the difference in the way we have to look at things today. We can't look at things based upon our opinion. We have to look at it on, do I have an assignment? Is my assignment complete? If I have an assignment, it's not complete, and the vaccine's required to complete it, that's between me and God then about whether or not I get a vaccine, because it's not about opinion anymore. It's about, is he going to let me out of my assignment? Okay, so I have this going on. I'm kind of neutral. I'm vaccinated. I'm okay. I don't fuss much. I can deal with it. People don't like me for it in some churches. People like me better in other churches. It's okay. All right. I go in to see my friend, the barber. And he has been telling me right before COVID hits, he's been telling me, I'm thinking that I may need to start back to church. I may need to get involved again, and I'm thinking I'm going to Pastor so-and-so's church. I think I'm going to do that. And I go in to see him one day after you can go back to the barber again. And I have my little mask on. He's got his little mask on. He's pulling my mask aside so he can trim my beard. Makes it real hard for barbers to trim beards, It just doesn't work good. So he's, I'm thinking he could pull it aside. It's okay. It's all right. He's talking to me. He says, "What's up with Pastor so-and-so?" And I says, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, he's gotten militant." I said, "What do you mean?" I knew exactly what he meant because I'd been watching some of the stuff that was being posted on Facebook. And he was being, militant, shaming people if they got a vaccine, telling people that it was against God's plan for you to wear a mask or stuff. I mean, just crazy. I mean, stuff that was just hard, harsh stuff. He goes, "I don't ever want to see that guy again. I don't have anything to do with him." This guy was 6 months before wanted to go to his church. And today he wants nothing to do with him, which now, understand, means I want nothing to do with Christianity again. Was this about a mask or a vaccine? No, this was about a guy's soul. But somebody got so caught up in their opinion, they couldn't see the hurt in the life they were called to minister to. You guys have such a solid foundation to simply practice his presence, forget about the opinions, do what he's doing so that you can complete your assignment right now. The Lord is really changing the face of the church. My personal opinion, if it matters, on this spiritual topic is that he's positioned you to be a leader in that. But there's a real question, and I think that's why he has me talking like this tonight. There's a real question on, can you keep along the path, or do you get caught up with the stuff that shifts you to another road? In Jeremiah 6:16, he says, you stand at a crossroads. And I think you are at a crossroads. I think you're at a crossroads to determine, am I going to keep along the ancient path, or am I going to choose a more convenient path that works for the way the church is functioning right now today? Am I going to be a functioning church because I chose the ancient path, or a dysfunctional church because I chose the path that got me back to normal? And do you want to be normal? If we look at Scripture, separation between God and man started in the garden. And if you look at what happens in the garden, everybody got twisted what God's instructions were. His instructions were, don't eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Somewhere in the midst of that, during these long-standing apparent conversations between Eve and the snake, because she wasn't shocked, he just out of the blue starts talking to her one day. Somewhere in these multiple conversations, of which we only have the last one, he has convinced her that God said, or he tries to convince her that God didn't say just don't eat of the fruit. He said don't eat of the fruit or touch the fruit. And the more we get into legalism, the more trouble we have. And so what the enemy was doing with Eve was sowing a subtle seed of deception that said, God is so legalistic, he really doesn't care about you. He's only concerned about him. And if you eat that fruit, you're going to be like him, and he doesn't want that. In other words, God said, don't look at it, don't touch it, don't eat it, don't have anything to do with it. He is being so hardcore on you. The truth was, God didn't say any of that stuff. He just said, don't eat it. It's not good for food. It ends up happening. She eats the fruit. She blames it on the snake. Adam blames it on God. Right? You can say initially you think he blames it on Eve, but it's not true. He blames it on God. The woman who you gave to me, it was your fault, God. You gave her to me. If you hadn't given her to me, none of this would have happened. Okay? You gave her to me. It's her fault. It's your fault for giving her to me. All this blame shifting going on. Does it sound like the world today? Everything's getting legalistic. Everybody's mandating this and mandating that, and the church is rebelling against this, and the world's rebelling against that, and this and all this stuff that's happening, and everybody's blaming it on somebody else. It's China's fault, right? It's Trump's fault. It's Biden's fault. It's whoever's fault. We're not focused in the right direction. We're not focused on seeing what God is actually saying. We're focused on the opinions of what we think he might have been saying. And what happens is there's separation. When God used to come down every afternoon, they walked together in the cool of the evening and they had fellowship with his presence. Now suddenly he's pushed away from them and a veil comes across the garden. It's separated from the rest of the world, the rest of creation. A cherubim is placed with a flaming sword at the gate to the garden, and man is kicked out. Why do I say a veil comes across it? Because if we look at the temple, which is supposed to be a picture of eternal things, the veil goes up in the temple when the temple is built to show God's separation from man. And you know what's embroidered? What was embroidered on that veil between the holy place and the most holy place? A cherubim with a flaming sword in its hand. Jesus comes along. We could talk more about this in more detail, but Jesus comes along and he's crucified, and when he dies, the veil in the temple tears in half. Why? Because God brought a restoration to the practice of the presence of God. We could now be in his presence again. It wasn't the high priest who could just go in with a rope tied around his foot so they could drag him out if the bells quit ringing because he was dead. Okay? Which, by the way, is pretty cool. Do you know there's no seam in the veil of the temple? And it was like 2.5 feet thick. It took 300 men to pick it up and carry it. Do we really think that when the high priest went into that temple, they brought in, 200 or 300 people and they lifted it up for him to crawl under? They'd all die because somebody's going to get their fingers on the other side, right? And you only had to just touch his presence and you died if you weren't prepared. It's like he walks through this veil with a rope tied around him, and then if he dies, they pull him back out. And it's just like the veil. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. The veil just like it's supernatural. It's like this portal that lets him in and out. But the veil gets ripped in two. Why? Because now it's just not a high priest who is prepped and done everything to get ready to go in, but everybody can be in his presence again. Everybody can go back into his presence. The angel that guarded Eden is gone. We can return to a state of Eden, practicing his presence every day, walking with him in the cool of the evening, whatever the cool of your evening is, the time we spend with him. Are we going to take that time being worried about telling him what we think he ought to do, or are we going to take that time to be still with him and let him tell us how he is working around us so that we can join him? That's the real question about this season. And the next question is, are we going to take that time at all? Are we going to let all this stuff we're dealing with cause us to hang curtains back up and tell him we don't want the time with him anymore? Because that's what we're doing when we get busy with our opinions about what's going on. We're hanging a curtain up and saying, I don't want to hear from you because I'm busy with dealing with the world out here right now. You know, you've kind of let it go to hell in a handbasket. And so I've got to fix it. That's practically speaking what we're saying when we get busy with telling him what we think he ought to do. Instead of letting him come in and tell us where he's positioning us to cooperate with his plan. Now that may be an extreme way of saying this to you, because here's the only message I had for you tonight. God has laid a foundation for you of practicing his presence. Don't abandon it. Don't let the enemy trick you in to moving away from it. And don't hang curtains back up to separate yourself again because you don't like what you're hearing or how he's working. The Lord is revealing the nature of his church. What's he saying about you right now? What is he revealing about you that he's wanting to work with? What's he revealing in your life that he needs to deal with? What's uncomfortable right now in this church? Not looking at everybody else. Where are we being revealed? Because if he does not reveal your flaws, you'll keep having them, and you're going to end back up in one of those seasons when you're trying to dig a foundation again. And you don't have to. Let him reveal whatever he wants to reveal. Let his presence come in and expose you to the light. Then deal with what ends up showing up when his light comes into your presence, rather than fussing that you got exposed for how you think, how you feel, or what you want. See, that's soul, mind, will, and emotions. How I think, how I feel, and what I want. God is exposing our soul-ruled places right now. And it's tearing some churches apart. It isn't tearing you apart. Oh, you can say, well, we disagree on stuff, we get divided on stuff, we fuss about this, we don't like that. Let me tell you, it's not tearing you apart. I go to enough churches, even in the midst of COVID, I go to enough churches, it's not tearing you apart. It's revealing who you are and where you are so that you can stay positioned with the rhythm and the foundation of what God has done in you. The truth is, the stuff that was going to tear you apart, you already walked through. You already dealt with it. Don't create it again just to walk through it again. Deal with what's new. Deal with the deeper levels of what he's showing you. And now let's take another step up. Because you've got the opportunity to lay another set of blocks on the foundation that's been built. Jesus is the chief cornerstone, and much of the world right now is rejecting him. When I say world, did I say world? Oh, I'm sorry. I meant much of the church right now is rejecting him. Because they don't want to build with the true line in alignment with the way he's pointing. See, if you try and build on a foundation against the chief cornerstone, and you don't lay the next stone exactly in alignment with the cornerstone, your building's going to fall down no matter how good the cornerstone is, no matter how good the foundation is. You have to be in exact alignment with it. And a lot of the church is rejecting Jesus right now without even realizing it, because they don't want to build with the direction he's going. You're not there. You've got a good row of stones laid around that foundation. God is calling you right now to lay the second layer, to move up another level, to stay in the forefront of what he's doing and who he is. And you may say, what in the world are you saying? Where are we in the forefront? We're 40 people. God does not care how many folks show up on Sunday morning in putting you in the forefront. He cares about where your heart is. Keep your heart in the right spot, and he's going to keep you in the forefront as an example of what he's doing. He's going to keep laying layer after layer after layer. And I don't care who out there says they've got a taller building than you. When it crumbles, yours is still going to stand. That's the bottom line. That's all I got. I don't even know where I was going. But I was so flustered in worship of wanting to change it, I had no chance to organize it and say it with any order. I just had to say, okay, Lord, I guess I'll go where you're going. Because that's what we got to do, right? We got to quit arguing with him about where we think we ought to go and start just going where he's going. So there it is. I encourage you with it. It is not a chastisement of you. Even if it did, some of the things stepped on some toes, don't hear it that way. It is honestly a compliment of you for being in a position to be able to build in this time. There's a lot of people having to lay their foundations again, and you're in a position to be able to build. It may not always feel like it. And you may feel like things haven't gotten a lot easier. I got to tell you this one more thing. You may feel like things haven't gotten a lot easier. That's the old issue of you're facing bigger battles and facing them with no more difficulty than you faced smaller battles in the past. That's the Olympic high jumper who's in training, and he jumps over 4 feet for a few weeks, and then he starts hitting the bar, and then he works real hard to change his technique and everything, and he's jumping over it again without hitting the bar, and then a few weeks later he's hitting the bar again, and he goes through cycle after cycle like that. And 6 or 8 months in, he goes to the coach and says, Coach, every 2 or 3 weeks I start hitting the bar again. I'm not getting any better at all. I'm failing. This is miserable. I'm not even getting better. And the coach says, oh no, son, I've been raising the bar 6 inches every 2 weeks. That's where you are. It may not feel easier, but God's been raising the bar for you every 2 weeks. And so I sincerely mean all I've said tonight complimentary to you, even if it's also challenging to you. I see what the Lord is doing in you and in your midst, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about doors that he's opening. I'm excited about opportunities that he's raising. And can I say I'm excited about the tests and trials that you're facing in order to get to experience those? We should be. James is pretty clear on that. Count it all joy, my brethren, when you fall in the various trials. For the testing of your faith produces patience. And when patience has had her perfect work, you'll be whole, you'll be complete, and you'll lack nothing. We'll talk more about that Sunday. All right? I bless you. I bless you, bless you, bless you. I'm just going to see, I feel like there was some things just to share. Can I just speak?